300 apex predators froze. The aroma of vintage champagne and heavy musk curdled into the metallic sting of absolute shock. On the cold marble floor lay Clara Hayes, a defective Omega. Her soul had just been violently severed by the alpha she was destined to rule beside. Dominic Sterling looked down at her agony and saw a solved problem. He believed he had secured his corporate empire. He was dead wrong. The most formidable alpha in the Northwest would not fall to silver bullets or rival claws. He would be dismantled by the invisible woman bleeding at his feet and the forensic ledgers she was prepared to weaponize. He was too blind to see the ruthless enemy already claiming his absolute power. The Centennial Solstice Gala of Silver Pine was no tribal ritual. It was a corporate summit masked as a celebration of dominance. Sterling Manor stood as a monument of glass and steel in the dark forests near Seattle. Every pane was engineered to restrain a shifted wolf. Outside, black luxury sedans lined the drive like a funeral procession. Inside, the air tasted of rare orchids and the predatory weight of 300 wolves in bespoke tuxedos. Clara Hayes stood by the towering ice sculpture. She held a tray of crystal flutes she never intended to serve. She wasn't a waitress, she was a ghost. At 21, Clara was a glitch in the Silver Pine bloodline. A childhood silver poisoning had paralyzed her wolf's development. She had never shifted. In a culture that worshipped primal strength, she was a liability. But Clara held a deadlier power. As the lead forensic accountant for Sterling Enterprises, she controlled the pack's multi-billion-dollar heart. She knew every offshore account, every hidden land deed, every bribe paid to the shadows of Washington. In the boardroom, she was the architect. In the pack, she was invisible. Tonight, the ballroom hummed with a single electric name, Alpha Dominic Sterling. At 28, he was the golden boy of the werewolf elite. His features were aristocratic and cold. His blue eyes calculated every move. He ran his pack like a hostile takeover. No weakness, total optics. It was common knowledge he would choose Vivian Croft as his Luna. She was a daughter of Richard Croft, the alpha of Riverstone and a key stakeholder in the company. She was statuesque, a flawless white wolf. She carried the lethal grace of a woman born for a throne. Clara watched from the shadows as Dominic and Vivian performed for the elders and human dignitaries. It was a perfect illusion, but the foundation had a fatal, unseen crack. Deep in her chest, Clara felt a strange, hollow ache, a sensation she told herself was only the weight of being alone. Tonight, the blood of the wolf would finally speak. For most, the 21st birthday is a coronation, the precise biological milestone where dormant instincts ignite to claim a fated partner. Most wolves celebrated this transition surrounded by kin, waiting for the first scent of a soul's counterpart. Clara Hayes expected nothing. As a woman with a silent wolf and no family left, she only wanted the clock to strike 12 so she could vanish into the city. At 11:55 p.m., the string quartet fell silent. The ballroom's heavy murmur died as Dominic Sterling led Vivian Croft to the marble staircase. He tapped the microphone. The sharp sound echoed off the vaulted ceilings like a gunshot. __, quote, _1__. Dominic began. His voice carried the crushing resonance of a natural alpha. Lesser wolves in the room instinctively lowered their heads in submission. He spoke of a new era for Silver Pine, a vision of expansion and strength. Beside him, the diamonds on Vivian's neck caught the light with a blinding, cold brilliance. Clara checked her watch. 11:58 p.m. 2 minutes remained until she could slip through the caterer's exit and disappear. She took a shallow breath to steady her nerves. 11:59 p.m. As Dominic wove his tale of territorial power, the atmosphere shifted. It wasn't a sound or a sight. It was an invisible seismic tremor that bypassed the mind and struck the feral core of the soul. Midnight arrived. Suddenly, the scent hit her. It was not a fragrance, but a violent, intoxicating wave of crushed pine needles, dark thunderstorms, and aged whiskey. It punched the air from her lungs. Clara gasped. The silver tray slipped from her fingers. The crystal flutes shattered against the marble floor with a jagged crash that severed Dominic's speech. 300 guests turned toward the dark corner of the ballroom. Clara saw none of them. Her vision narrowed to a single, burning point of focus. Her heart hammered against her ribs, driven by a rhythm that was no longer her own. Her wolf, silent for over a decade, awoke and clawed at her mind. It howled a single, undeniable word: mate. Clara looked up, her terrified hazel eyes locked onto the man at the top of the stairs. Dominic Sterling had stopped speaking. His hands gripped the mahogany podium until the wood began to splinter. He had felt the invisible lightning bolt of the moon goddess's decree. The fated bond is a two-way tether. Dominic's nostrils flared as he inhaled the scent of vanilla, old parchment, and rain. It was a fragrance designed by destiny to bring a man to his knees. His eyes frantically scanned the crowd, searching for a high-born warrior or a visiting alpha's daughter. Instead, his gaze landed on the broken glass in the corner. He found Clara Hayes, the quiet accountant in a plain navy dress. The silence in the ballroom became absolute. It was the suffocating weight of a world changing forever. Ancient law dictates that the fated mate bond is an unbreakable cosmic decree. Но в залах заседаний современной стаи балансовые отчеты имеют привычку заставлять богов замолчать. Доминик Стерлинг посмотрел на Клэра Хейс. На мгновение в его глазах вспыхнул первобытный трепет. Затем контроль взял на себя генеральный директор. Изумление умерло, сменившись холодным, хирургическим отвращением. Клэра двигалась неосознанно. Связь действовала как физический прилив, таща ее через бальный зал к лестнице, к нему. Ее дыхание сбивалось на короткие рваные вдохи. Годы хронических болезней и стыд за то, что она была unshifted wolf, внезапно показались далеким кошмаром. Она верила, что лунная богиня не забыла ее. Она верила, что ее берегли для альфы. «Доминик», — выдохнула она в тяжелой тишине комнаты. Высоко на лестничной площадке лицо Вивиан Крофт исказилось в усмешке. Она оценила угрозу одним взглядом. Вивиан наклонилась к Доминик, ее голос превратился в резкое, ядовитое шипение. «Исправь это, Доминик. Сейчас же. Если ты примешь дефектную Омегу как свою луну, Сильверпайн станет посмешищем. Мой отец разорвет слияние». Челюсть Доминик сжалась. Его волк кричал, требуя заявить на нее права, защитить женщину, которую он был рожден оберегать. У него было 5 секунд, чтобы выбрать между своей душой и своей империей. Но Доминик Стерлинг был человеком, который поклонялся алтарю власти. И он верил, что авторитет строится на страхе, а не на судьбе. Как он мог вести за собой стаю хищников с искалеченной, неспособной к обороту парой рядом? Он посмотрел на нее сверху вниз. Она дрожала. Она буквально вибрировала от отчаянной биологической потребности в его прикосновении. Бизнесмен убил волка. Доминик выпрямил спину и высвободил свою ауру альфы. Она ударила по комнате как физический груз, удушающее давление, заставившее всех окружающих волков упасть на колени. Кларара, и без того хрупкая, рухнула на твердый мрамор. «Кларара Хейс!» — объявил Доминик. Его голос не был зовом пары. Это был клинок палача. «Ты прерываешь это священное собрание, поддавшись иллюзии связи, которая не приносит этой стае никакой пользы». Кларара посмотрела вверх. Ее зрение затуманилось от слез. «Доминик, это связь. Ты чувствуешь это. Я знаю, что чувствуешь». Доминик огрызнулся, и его голос разнесся так, чтобы его услышал каждый соперник и каждый член стаи. «То, что я чувствую, это грубая ошибка лунной богини. Луна — это щит и мать стаи. Ты — обуза. Сломленная, неспособная к обороту девчонка, которой место среди пыльных бухгалтерских книг, а не на троне». Жестокий смех эхом разнесся со стороны свиты Вивиен. Сердце Кларара замерло. В ее груди невидимая нить, связывающая их души, начала гореть белой раскаленной агонией. «Доминик, пожалуйста», — прохрипела она, хватаясь за грудь, когда физическая боль от его отказа начала проявляться. Когда истинная пара отвергает связь, это не просто разрыв. Это систематическое раздирание самой души. «Я Альфа Сильверпайн», — заявил Доминик, и его глаза превратились в кремень. Он смотрел на нее не с любовью, а с беспощадным намерением. Доминик Стерлинг does not negotiate with the stars.
He stands before his pack and spits in the face of the divine. I do not bow to fate when fate offers me weakness, he declares. His voice carries the weight of a gavel. He invokes the ancient rites of severance, words meant to stay buried in the dust of history. Then the sentence is passed. I, Alpha Dominic Sterling, reject you, Clara Hayes, as my fated mate. The rejection hits like a lead slug to the chest. It is a spiritual amputation. Clara Hayes collapses, her body folding under the weight of a soul being torn in two. A scream, raw, guttural, and inhuman, scrapes her throat. On the white marble floor, a single crimson bloom of blood spreads from her nose. Inside her, the dormant wolf does not just howl. It retreats into a darkness so deep it mimics death. The Silverpine elite watch with a morbid, silent intensity. Some feel the sting of shame. Most simply nod at the brutal efficiency of their leader. Dominic does not look down. He does not see the woman he just shattered. Vivian Croft moves in, claiming the vacant space at his side with a possessive grip. His voice remains a steady, chilling monotone. Tonight, I announce my chosen mate and the future Luna of Silverpine, Vivian Croft. The room hesitates. Then the applause begins. It builds from a ripple to a roar. The pack chooses survival over sympathy. They fall in line behind the decree of a tyrant. Clara is fading. Her lungs refuse to hold the air. Her vision narrows into a dark, suffocating tunnel. In the world of the shifted, a public rejection is a death sentence for the unshifted. The heart simply stops fighting. She closes her eyes, inviting the silence to end the humiliation. But the universe has a jagged sense of justice. The celebration dies instantly. It is as if the air itself has been sucked out of the lungs of every guest. A sudden, unnatural frost creeps across the crystal chandeliers. The temperature drops until breath turns to mist. The massive mahogany doors do not swing open. They are blasted off their tracks. The heavy brass hinges scream in agony. Then come the footsteps, heavy, deliberate. They carry the cadence of an ancient, terrifying power. Alpha Silas Blackwood enters the room. Dominic Sterling is a corporate predator in a tailored suit. Silas Blackwood is a landslide. He is the alpha of Obsidian Ridge, the ghost of the Cascade Mountains. He is the nightmare parents tell their pups to keep them from the woods. Between Silverpine and Obsidian Ridge lies a blood feud decades deep. A jagged scar cuts through Silas's left eyebrow, a permanent reminder of past betrayals. He is only here because of a fragile solstice amnesty treaty. He stands 6 feet 5 inches tall. His dominance is a physical weight that triggers a primal panic in every wolf present. He does not acknowledge the alpha on the stage. He does not look at the new Luna. His eyes are fixed on the broken girl dying on the floor. He arrived without the expected finery of the elite. Silas Blackwood wore a heavy dark wool overcoat over a bespoke black suit, his presence radiating a sense of unadulterated menace. His eyes, a striking and unnatural shade of amber, scanned the assembly. Dominic, The name was a low, gravelly rumble that made the very floorboards vibrate. "I entered your territory under a banner of peace," Silas growled, only to find the suffocating stench of cowardice filling this room. Dominic Sterling went rigid. He shoved Vivian Croft behind his back and descended 2 steps. He let his alpha aura flare, a desperate attempt to meet the newcomer's weight. It was a candle trying to push back a hurricane. "You are a guest here, Silas," Dominic warned. "Watch your tone, or your amnesty is revoked." Silas Blackwood ignored him. His amber gaze was already locked onto the small, broken figure bleeding onto the cold marble. As he stepped across the threshold, the fire burning in Clara Hayes' chest suddenly went cold. A new scent flooded her senses, cutting through the sterile ballroom air. It carried the weight of dark earth, the heat of burning embers, and a terrifying, untamed wildness. This was no frantic, desperate pull like the one she shared with Dominic Sterling. This was older, more profound. It was a soothing balm applied to a shattered soul. Silas moved past the frozen pack members. They parted for him like a receding tide. Some could not stop themselves from baring their necks in instinctive submission to an apex predator. He came to a halt before Clara Hayes. For a heartbeat, he simply watched her. He noted the plain dress, the blood on her chin, and the dying light in her eyes. He looked back at Dominic Sterling. "You rejected her," Silas stated. It was a verdict, not a question. "She is an unshifted defect," Dominic spat, desperate to reclaim his status. "She is nothing to you, Blackwood. This is internal pack business." "A defect," Silas repeated in a voice like silk and gravel. He crouched, his massive frame casting a shadow that swallowed Clara. He stripped off his heavy wool overcoat. Gently he draped the weight of it over her shivering shoulders. The garment was saturated with his scent. As it enveloped her, Clara Hayes exhaled a long, shuddering breath. The agony in her chest dulled to a manageable ache. Silas reached out with a large, calloused hand to tilt her chin upward. Amber met hazel in a moment of silent communion. Silas Blackwood felt it then, the raw, suffocated power vibrating within her. It wasn't blocked by weakness. It was a trauma so deep, only a true mate could reach the core. Getting her out of this ballroom alive would be a bloody affair. Yet, looking at the alpha of Obsidian Ridge, Clara saw something new. Absolute, unwavering certainty. Silas stood up in one fluid motion, lifting the girl as if she were weightless. She buried her face against his chest, seeking sanctuary in his scent. __quote_14__, Silas boomed. His voice had traded quiet menace for the thunder of absolute command. Dominic's face burned with sudden fury. Several elite guards lunged forward, eyes flashing yellow as their claws tore through the air. Silas Blackwood didn't even flinch. Silas Blackwood tightened his hold on Clara Hayes and exhaled a command that shattered reality. It didn't just vibrate in the air. It struck the room like a physical hammer. Above them, the remaining crystal in the chandeliers groaned and spiderwebbed. Elite guards buckled to their knees. They clawed at their throats, choking on the suffocating gravity of a true alpha. Silas announced, his voice a low, echoing bell of finality. He paused, letting the insult fester in the silence. Silas turned his lethal focus to Dominic Sterling, who was trembling under the pressure. Silas thundered. His hand gripped her firmly, claiming her before the assembly. __quote_22__. He let his gaze sweep the room, promising fire. __quote_23__. The silence that followed was heavy, absolute, and terrified. No one dared to breathe. Even Vivian Croft stood like a statue of ice, her face drained of color. Silas turned on his heel.
He carried Clara Hayes against his chest as if she were the only thing of value in the room. He stepped through the heavy mahogany doors, leaving Dominic Sterling to stand amongst the wreckage of his own pride. They met the freezing bite of the Seattle night. Clara closed her eyes, letting the heat of the enemy Alpha bleed into her marrow. Her life had ended in a scream of agony. Yet, as she felt the rhythmic iron beat of Silas's heart, she knew her real story was only just beginning. The door of the armor-plated Mercedes-Benz G-Wagon slammed shut with a heavy mechanical thud. It sealed her in a world of rich leather and the grounding scent of Silas Blackwood. Outside, the winter rain lashed at the bulletproof glass. Inside, the air was silent and strictly controlled. The convoy of black vehicles tore away from Sterling Manor and onto Interstate 90 East. They surged toward the jagged, frozen peaks of Snoqualmie Pass. Then Clara's body finally gave way. The rejection of a fated mate is not a simple heartache. It is the violent demolition of the soul's very foundation. Her heart spiked into a frantic, lethal rhythm. She gasped for air that wouldn't come. Her fingers clawed at the expensive upholstery as her vision dissolved into a black tunnel. "Gideon, push to 80, Silas barked at his beta. His voice held a rare, jagged edge of panic. "Get Dr. Arthur Penhaligon on the line. Have the trauma suite ready and the epinephrine primed. We are losing her." Silas didn't wait for a reply. He pulled her trembling form across the console and into his lap. The quiet archivist, who had spent her life hiding in ledgers, felt weightless in his arms. Her skin was the color of ash. Her lips were fading into a terrifying, ghostly blue. __quote _26 ___. Silas commanded. This wasn't the brutal bark of Dominic Sterling. It was a deep, resonant anchor thrown into a lethal storm. Clara's hazel eyes flickered open, distant and drowning. "It burns," she whispered, her fingers catching the fabric of his ruined bespoke suit. Her chest felt hollow, a cavern where her heart used to beat. "There is nothing left." Silas didn't flinch. He pressed a heavy, scarred palm against her sternum, right over the failing rhythm. He insisted. He had severed the bond, but he had not taken her soul. To save a wolf dying from a rejected bond, an alpha must do the unthinkable. He must flood the victim with his own raw vitality. It is an ancient, intimate violence. It demands absolute submission from the weak and a terrifying sacrifice from the strong. Silas let his defensive shields fall. He channeled his essence, a crashing tide of mountain pine, cold earth, and predatory power, directly into her. Clara Hayes arched her back with a sharp gasp. The white-hot vacuum left by Dominic Sterling met the suffocating heat of Silas. It was molten gold poured into a shattered porcelain vase. The agony didn't vanish. It simply hardened into a dull, heavy ache. Her tremors faded. She lay exhausted against his chest as the G-Wagon climbed into the frozen peaks of the Cascades. "Why?" she breathed. "I am unshifted, a defect. Dominic was right. I am a liability." Silas watched the ember streetlights flicker across his face. His fury wasn't for her. It was for the silver pine. He growled. The wolf had built a fortress to keep her alive. Dominic Sterling is a man of margins and spreadsheets. He saw a locked door and assumed the room was empty. He growled under store, Silas said. For 21 years she had been treated like broken glass. To the alpha of Obsidian Ridge, she was a sealed vault. As they crossed into the unmapped depths of Blackwood Manor, Clara did something she had never done. She closed her eyes. She felt safe in the arms of her pack's greatest enemy. She woke 3 days later in a room of dark mahogany and riverstone. Outside, a valley of untouched snow stretched to the horizon.
Dr. Arthur Penhaligon watched over her.
He spoke of stabilized temperatures and past crisis, but he knew the mind healed slower than the bone. That evening, Silas entered the room. The gravity of his presence was so absolute that the fire in the hearth seemed to stand at attention. Silas sat in the heavy leather armchair. He wore a simple dark Henley and faded jeans. It was a sharp contrast to the tailored vanity of Dominic Sterling's inner circle. Yet, the alpha of Obsidian Ridge radiated 10 times the authority. He reached out, offering a steaming mug of tea. "How does the fortress hold?" Silas asked. His voice was a low, comforting rumble. Clara Hayes sat up and took the mug. "Quiet," she admitted, "but it is no longer burning. Thank you for everything." Silas dismissed her gratitude with a wave. "You owe me nothing, Clara, but Silverpine owes you a great deal." He leaned back. "My scouts report that Dominic Sterling is moving fast. He is expediting the mating ceremony with Vivian Croft. They are finalizing the merger between Sterling Enterprises and the Riverstone Pack." The mention of the company changed everything. The frail, heartbroken girl vanished instantly. In her place stood the razor-sharp forensic accountant. This was the woman who had mastered the financial labyrinth of a billion-dollar empire. Her hazel eyes turned to flint. "He is rushing because he is terrified," Clara Hayes said flatly. Silas leaned forward. He rested his elbows on his knees. His interest was visible. Terrified of what? The massive cash injection the Crofts are bringing? "He needs that liquidity to mask a catastrophic deficit," Clara Hayes stated. Her voice dropped into a professional, icy cadence. "Dominic Sterling called me an ink-stained ledger keeper. He forgot that I hold the keys to that ledger. Silverpine is an illusion, Silas. Sterling Enterprises is drowning in debt." Silas narrowed his amber eyes. "Explain." Clara Hayes began the count. 3 years ago, Dominic Sterling started liquidating PAC assets. Real estate in Bellevue, commercial properties downtown, even the ancestral hunting grounds near Mount Rainier. He funneled that capital through shell corporations in Delaware. Then he moved it offshore. It now sits in blind trusts at a UBS branch in Zurich. She took a sip of her tea. Her mind was firing on all cylinders. He is not just expanding his territory, he owes money. Tens of millions. "To whom?" Silas asked. Clara Hayes dropped the bombshell. "A private human syndicate. These are military groups equipped with silver nitrate weaponry. He has been hiring them to destabilize the rogue populations on your northern borders. He fabricated an uprising to keep you distracted. He wanted the logging routes." Silas went perfectly still. The silence in the room became heavy. It was laden with predatory intent. The blood feud between their packs had lasted decades. But funding human hunters to kill wolves was treason. It was an unforgivable crime against their species. "Do you have proof of this?" Silas asked. His voice was deadly quiet. "I am the proof," Clara Hayes said. She lifted her chin. "But more importantly, I have the data. Before the gala, I found anomalies in the quarterly filings. I compiled the offshore routing numbers. I have the wire receipts and digital signatures. It links Dominic Sterling directly to the mercenaries. It is all encrypted on an offline UB key." "Where is the key?" Silas demanded. "In a private safety deposit box," Clara Hayes replied, "at the Chase Bank on 4th Avenue in downtown Seattle. It is registered under a human alias." She looked directly into the terrifying eyes of Silas Blackwood. She did not flinch. "Dominic Sterling rejected me because he thought I was weak. I built the financial fortifications that keep his pack breathing. I know exactly which brick to pull to make his entire empire scream." A slow, predatory smile spread across the face of Silas Blackwood. It was the look of a wolf who had just been handed the exposed throat of his greatest rival. He reached out, his massive hand gently tucking his stray lock of hair behind the ear of Clara Hayes. The contact ignited a circuit of electricity down her spine. It was a sensation far deeper and more absolute than the panicked pull of her former fated bond. "A keeper of ink-stained ledgers," Silas Blackwood murmured, his thumb tracing the sharp line of her jaw. Dominic Sterling threw away a queen. He handed her the very blade meant to execute him. He stood, his massive frame eclipsing the firelight and casting a protective shadow over her bed. "Rest tonight, Clara Era Hayes," Silas Blackwood commanded with quiet gravity. "Tomorrow we descend on Seattle, and we are going to bankrupt a king." The transition from the frozen, silent peaks of the Cascades to the charcoal rains of downtown Seattle felt like a shift between dimensions. Silas Blackwood did not travel lightly. 2 armored black Escalades shielded their G-Wagon as they carved through the midday pulse of 4th Avenue. Clara Hayes sat in the passenger seat, draped in a tailored charcoal trench coat provided by the Alpha staff. The trembling, shattered girl from the ballroom was gone. Her posture was steel. Her hazel eyes scanned the glass towers of the financial district with the cold calculation of a hunter returning to her own territory. Clara Hayes said, her voice level and sharp. Silas Blackwood adjusted the cuffs of his dark suit. His amber eyes remained locked on a silver sedan that had lingered 2 cars back since they crossed the I-90 floating bridge. __quote _63 __. They descended into the subterranean darkness of the Chase Bank Tower. The air was thick with a scent of damp pavement and cold exhaust. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, stretching their shadows into jagged, unnatural shapes against the concrete. Clara Hayes stepped out, her heels striking the floor with rhythmic, predatory precision. Silas Blackwood moved beside her, a towering wall of latent violence, while Gideon, his beta, secured the rear. They cut through the private vault sector with silent authority. Mr. Henderson, the bank manager, turned ash-gray the moment Silas Blackwood approached the desk. Humans cannot identify alpha pheromones, but their primal instincts recognize an apex predator when he enters the room. Henderson hurriedly verified the Catherine Miller alias and escorted the group into the reinforced steel heart of the bank. Box 804 clicked open. Inside sat a velvet pouch containing the UBI key, a heavily encrypted hard drive, and the stack of bearer bonds Clara Hayes had siphoned away as her final insurance policy. She slid the weight of the evidence into her leather briefcase. She whispered, looking up at the Alpha. Silas Blackwood looked down at her, his expression one of dark, lethal satisfaction. __quote _66 __. The elevator doors hissed open, and the atmosphere in the subterranean tomb shifted. It tasted of ozone and wet fur, the metallic bite of cordite screaming a warning before the first shot ever rang out. Silas didn't hesitate. His arm was a steel bar across Clara's chest, throwing her behind a concrete pillar, a heartbeat before a suppressed round turned the G-Wagon's glass into a diamond spray. Gideon roared, his eyes igniting with a predatory gold. He drew heavy iron, barking lead back at the black SUVs choking the exit ramp. 5 figures detached themselves from the shadows. These weren't wolves. They were professional killers in tactical mat, armed with the one thing every shifter fears: silver nitrate rounds. This was the mercenary syndicate Clara had unburied in the ledgers. Dominic hadn't just been playing border games. He had sent a hit squad to erase his last mistake. __quote _67 __. The lead mercenary barked. A curtain of lead began to chew the concrete sheltering Clara into grey dust. Silas let out a sound that wasn't human. It was a bone-rattling vibration that seemed to shake the very foundations of the garage. He didn't reach for a gun. He broke. In a blur of violent geometry, Silas shed his skin. Where the man stood, a monster now crouched. A wolf the color of a moonless night,
standing nearly shoulder-high to a man. His ember eyes burned with a demonic ancient fury. He didn't run. He launched. He hit the mercenaries like a freight train made of muscle and teeth.
Clara pressed her palms to her ears, the air thickening with the copper tang of blood and the searing scent of silver. Silas was a whirlwind of slaughter, but even an alpha has limits. A second wave poured from the stairwell. A silver-loaded shotgun leveled at Silas's blind spot. Clara felt the world slow. The alpha who had salvaged her from the wreckage, who had seen value where her fated mate sought trash, was about to die in a damp parking lot for the crime of protecting her. No. The word didn't come from her throat. It came from the dark, locked vaults of her soul. Since childhood, silver poisoning had acted as a dam, holding her wolf in a state of suffocating stasis. But a dam isn't a tomb. It's a reservoir of pressure. As the mercenary racked his weapon, the dam didn't leak. It shattered. This wasn't the moon goddess's call. This was pure, unadulterated rage, the desperate need to protect her chosen mate. Her bones snapped and reset with the sound of breaking dry wood. Her charcoal coat shredded into silk ribbons. The pain was an inferno, burning through years of atrophy in a single blinding second. She didn't just endure it, she hunted it. The trigger clicked. But before the silver slug could find its mark, a streak of luminescent white slammed the shooter into the asphalt. Silas froze, his jaws crimson. Standing over the broken mercenary was a wolf of impossible beauty. Smaller than the alpha, but sleek and corded with muscle. Her fur was pure, radiant white, tipped with a metallic sheen of silver. This was no defective omega. 10 years of suppressed lightning finally broke. The aura radiating from Clara Hayes did not merely intimidate, it paralyzed. Human mercenaries felt a primal, bone-deep dread that forced their fingers to uncurl from their weapons. Clara's wolf stood reclaimed, shaking out her coat as her hazel gaze locked with the amber fire of Silas Blackwood. This was no biological accident. This was a covenant forged in blood, survival, and choice. Silas Blackwood, the most feared alpha in the Northern Territories, lowered his massive head. The Queen had finally arrived. The grand atrium of Sterling Enterprises in Seattle stood as a temple to modern vanity. It was a cathedral of sweeping glass, polished obsidian, and brushed steel. For the Silver Pine Centennial, the air held a suffocating weight. It smelled of expensive Tom Ford cologne and rare Mediterranean blooms. Beneath the silk of 300 bespoke tuxedos and designer gowns lay the coiled muscle of apex predators. Dominic Sterling waited beneath an arch of white roses and silver ribbons. He wore midnight blue and the expression of a conqueror. Vivian Croft stood beside him, draped in diamonds and a custom Vera Wang gown. They were the perfect image of a corporate power couple. The guest list was a calculated collision of two worlds. Werewolf elders sat beside oblivious investment bankers from Goldman Sachs and Morgan Stanley. Mayor Richard Higgins and 2 state senators smiled, unaware of the fangs hidden behind the polite chatter. Dominic was not just sealing a mating bond, he was anchoring a multi-billion-dollar merger with the Croft family shipping empire. Elder Harrison Caldwell stepped to the marble podium. His face was a map of ancient pack politics. He unrolled the sacred parchment with the gravity of a death sentence. His voice filled the room, echoing of the brushed steel. He spoke of the moon goddess and the laws of ancestors. He declared the union of Alpha Dominic Sterling and Luna Vivian Croft. If any wolf challenges this leadership or the honor of this territory, let them speak now. Let them face the judgment of the goddess or forever hold their peace. Then came the ceremonial pause. History was asking for a challenge. No one speaks against an alpha in his own fortress. Dominic allowed a thin, victorious smile to show. He believed the weak link was gone. He believed his secrets were buried beneath this new golden alliance. The reinforced oak and steel barrier at the atrium's mouth did not simply open. It detonated. The shockwave turned security partitions into a rain of jagged glass. Human socialites scrambled beneath velvet tables. The werewolves present dropped into primal defensive crouches. Their eyes burned with gold and yellow light. Snarls tore through the sudden silence. Through the hanging dust stepped two figures. Alpha Silas Blackwood avoided the vanity of ceremonial robes or expensive tuxedos. He wore a suit of pitch black. Yet he moved with the predatory grace of a conqueror claiming a broken city. His amber eyes radiated an intensity that felt ancient and demonic. His alpha aura was a physical weight. It smelled of dark pine and ozone. It forced the weaker silver pine wolves to their knees. Submission was not a choice, it was a biological reflex. But the crowd did not stare at the Lord of Obsidian Ridge. Their terror focused on the woman at his side. Clara Era Hayes had returned. The invisible, hunched accountant who bled out on a gala floor was dead. In her place stood a queen. She wore a floor-length gown of liquid crimson. The silk burned against her pale skin. Her posture was a master class in defiance. Her hazel eyes were cold and perfectly fearless. Most importantly, she was no longer biologically muted. Her newly awakened wolf pulsed with a lunar aura. It was a presence so pure it commanded every heartbeat in the room. "I challenge the legitimacy of this leadership," she declared. Her voice was a blade. It sliced through the fading echoes of the ruined doors. Dominic Sterling's face turned the color of a fresh shroud. He looked like a polished corpse. His knuckles went white against the marble podium. "Clara Ara," he stammered, "you are dead." His corporate mask shattered into 1,000 pieces of panic. He barked an order for the guards. He authorized lethal force. Clara Ara merely smiled. Her heels clicked against the marble as she advanced down the center aisle. Silas Blackwood followed a half-step behind. He was a silent mountain of latent violence. No one in the room dared to move. "Your guards are currently indisposed," she replied smoothly. "They are sleeping in a subterranean garage at the Chase Bank on 4th Avenue. She mentioned the human mercenaries he had hired to kill her. The elders of the pack bristled at the insult. Human interference was a sacred violation. Clara Ara stopped 10 feet from the altar. Silas Blackwood stood behind her, an immovable wall. Clara Ara produced a sleek leather clutch. She withdrew a slim tablet. With 2 taps, the 3-story digital screens went black. She gestured toward the massive glowing displays. "Trace the wire transfers. They flow through a Delaware shell company called Apex Holdings LLC. From there, the wealth vanished into numbered blind trusts at a Zurich UBS branch." Around the room, human investors gripped their phones. Whispers turned to frantic calculations. Sterling Enterprises wasn't just failing, it was a hollowed-out corpse. Vivian Croft took a slow, trembling step away from the man she once coveted. The proof of his insolvency was undeniable. It was absolute. __quote_79_ Clara said. Her voice dropped an octave, turning sharp and lethal. She looked directly at the pack elders. __quote_80__. She tapped her tablet again. The screens flickered, revealing encrypted contracts and black market purchase orders. "Quote 81, she revealed. The words fell like iron weights into a silent abyss. Quote 82. Clara leaned into the silence. Quote 83. Elder Caldwell staggered. His hand clutched his chest as if the silver had pierced his own heart. To arm humans against wolves was the ultimate desecration, the highest sin. a sentence written in blood. Quote 84, Caldwell demanded, his voice shaking with a terrifying golden fury. Quote 85. Dominic was no longer a CEO, he was a cornered animal. Hyperventilating in the ruins of his empire. He looked to Vivian Croft for help, but the daughter of Riverstone was already retreating. Disgust was the only thing left on her face. Quote 86 Dominic screamed, his mind finally snapping. He jabbed a trembling finger at the woman who had unmade him. Quote 87 His eyes burned a feral toxic yellow. Fangs tore through his gums. Claws shredded the fine fabric of his tuxedo. Blinded by the total destruction of his world, Dominic lunged from the stage. He didn't wait to shift. Dominic Sterling moved with a jagged, homicidal instinct of a predator who knows his end is near. He aimed for the throat. He wanted to kill the truth before it could speak. Silas Blackwood coiled like a heavy spring, ready to tear the threat out of the air. But Clara Ara Hayes did not move. She did not flinch. She did not retreat behind the shadow of the Obsidian Ridge Alpha. She simply raised a hand. As Dominic's claws came within inches of her skin, the air in the atrium changed.
It didn't just grow cold, it grew heavy.
This was not the jagged, bloody dominance of a warlord. This was something celestial. Clara unleashed her newly awakened aura. It was a suffocating weight of pure lunar authority. The dormant power of the silver-white wolf, suppressed for years, exploded outward. It felt like liquid lead and ancient, righteous metal. It hit Dominic with the force of a physical hammer. He choked. His momentum vanished. His nervous system betrayed him, and his knees shattered against the marble. The Alpha of Silverpine lay gasping at the feet of the woman he had discarded as trash. The silence in the room was absolute. It was the sound of a legacy dying. Clara looked down at the man who had tried to break her soul just days prior. Her voice did not shake. It carried through the dead quiet like a tolling bell. She whispered. She revealed the cold truth of their bond. The moon goddess hadn't paired them for love. She had paired them for an execution. Clara Ara was the only one who knew where the rod was buried. Silas Blackwood stepped forward. His heavy shoes clicked against the stone, a steady, lethal rhythm. He looked at the trembling elders of Silverpine and spoke a sentence that ended their history. Dominic Sterling had committed treason. By the ancient laws of the territories, his life was forfeit. His lands were gone. Silverpine ceased to exist in that moment. It was no longer a pack. Its people and its debts now fell under the jurisdiction of Obsidian Ridge. Silas looked at Dominic with pure disgust, but the wolves weren't the only ones hunting. Outside, the wail of sirens cut through the night. Blue and red lights danced across the glass windows like ghosts. Clara Ara leaned down, her voice a cold scalpel. She informed him that Agent Thomas Kessler was already in the lobby. The FBI's white-collar crime division had arrived with a federal warrant. While Dominic was fighting for his pride, the SEC was dismantling his empire. The Swiss accounts were frozen. The ledgers were closed. Dominic Sterling had nothing left but the air in his lungs. Enforcers from Obsidian Ridge dragged the sobbing shell of a man toward the waiting federal authorities. The doors closed. The silence returned. Then the shift happened. One by one, the elite guards of Silverpine dropped. The elders followed. They were bowing in surrender to Silas Blackwood, but their eyes were fixed on the woman beside him. They were in awe of the terrifying, brilliant light she radiated. Clara Hayes looked out over the sea of bowed heads. The crushing weight of her past, the years of being invisible and discarded, finally turned to ash. In that fire, the defective Omega died.
What emerged was the unyielding heart of a queen. Clara Hayes did not just survive her fractured fate. She tore the pages out and wrote a new one.
She built an empire on the one thing the werewolf elite lacked: the truth. She claimed a love that saw her absolute worth while the rest of the world remained blind. Dominic Sterling's collapse was not a tragedy. It was a surgical removal. The Werewolf Council did more than strip his title. They reached into their history and cut his name out of the record entirely. He did not die a warrior's death. Instead, the golden boy of the elite was handed to the humans. He was buried in a federal cell for corporate fraud, a common criminal rotting in a concrete box. Clara Hayes was no longer the girl hiding behind an ink-stained ledger. She was the architect of a new world. She did not retreat into the shadows. She took her seat at the right hand of Silas Blackwood, bound by a love she chose for herself. Together, they forged the fractured Northern Territories into a single, terrifying force. Under their rule, Obsidian Ridge became a monument to her brilliant, calculating mind.
Clara proved that destiny is not a mandate handed down by fate. It is a ledger. You hold the pen. You decide the cost. And sometimes, the most dangerous power in existence lives in the very soul the world called broken.